Then they lifted up Lúthien and Beren from the earth and bore them aloft into the clouds. Below them suddenly thunder rolled, lightnings leaped upward, and the mountains quaked. Fire and smoke belched forth from Thingol, and flaming bolts were hurled far abroad, falling ruinous upon the lands, and the Noldor in Hithlum trembled. But Thorondor took his way far above the earth, seeking the high roads of heaven, where the sun day-long shines unveiled, and the moon walks amid the cloudless stars. Thus they passed swiftly over Dor nu Fauglith and over Taur nu Fuin, and came above the hidden valley of Tumladin. No cloud nor mist lay there, and looking down, Lúthien saw far below, as a white light starting from a green jewel, the radiance of Gondolin the Fair, where Turgon dwelt. But she wept, for she thought that Beren would surely die. He spoke no word, nor opened his eyes, and knew thereafter nothing of his flight. And at the last the eagle set them down upon the borders of Doriath, and they were come to that same dell whence Beren had stolen in despair, and left Lúthien asleep. There the eagles laid her at Beren's side, and returned to the peaks of Chrysaegrim in their high eyries. But Huan came to her, and together they tended Beren, even as before when she healed him of the wound that Curufin gave him. But this wound was fell and poisonous. Long Beren lay, and his spirit wandered upon the dark borders of death, knowing ever an anguish that pursued him from dream to dream. Then suddenly, when her hope was almost spent, he woke again and looked up, and he heard beneath the leaves singing, soft and slow beside him, Lúthien Tinuviel, and it was spring again. Thereafter Beren was named Erchamion, which is the one-handed, and suffering was graven in his face. But at last he was drawn back to life by the love of Lúthien, and he arose, and together they walked in the woods once more. And they did not hasten from that place, for it seemed fair to them. Lúthien indeed was willing to wander in the wild without returning, forgetting house and people and all the glory of the elf kingdoms, and for a time Beren was content. But he could not for long forget his oath to return to Menegroth, nor would he withhold Lúthien from Thingol forever. For he held by the law of men, deeming it perilous to set at naught the will of the Father, save at the last need, and it seemed also to him unfit that one so royal and fair as Lúthien should live always in the woods, as the rude hunters among men, without home or honor all the fair things which are the delight of the queens of the Eldalie. Therefore, after a while, he persuaded her, and their footsteps forsook the houseless lands, and he passed into Doriath, leading Lúthien home. So their doom willed it. Upon Doriath evil days had fallen. Grief and silence had come upon all its people when Lúthien was lost. Long they sought for her in vain, and it is told that in that time Dairon, the minstrel of Thingol, strayed from the land and was seen no more. He it was that made music for the dance and song of Lúthien before Beren came to Doriath, and he had loved her and set all his thought of her in his music. He became the greatest of all the minstrels of the elves east of the sea, named even before Maglor, son of Fëanor. But seeking for Lúthien in despair, he wandered upon strange paths, and passing over the mountains, he came into the east of Middle-earth, where for many ages he made lament beside dark waters for Lúthien, daughter of Thingol, most beautiful of all living things. In that time, Thingol turned to Melian, but now she withheld her counsel from him, saying that the doom that he had devised must work to its appointed end, and that he must wait now upon time. But Thingol learned that Lúthien had journeyed far from Doriath, for messages came secretly from Celegorm, as has been told, saying that Filegund was dead, and Beren was dead, but Lúthien was in Nargothrond, and that Celegorm would wed her. Then Thingol was wrathful, and he sent forth spies, thinking to make war upon Nargothrond, and thus he learned that Lúthien was again fled, and that Celegorm and Curufin were driven from Nargothrond. Then his counsel was in doubt, for he had not the strength to assail the 7 sons of Fëanor, but he sent messengers to Himring to summon their aid in seeking for Lúthien, since Celegorm had not sent her to the house of her father, nor had he kept her safely. But in the north of his realm, his messengers met with a peril sudden and unlooked for, the onslaught of Carcharoth, the wolf of Angband. In his madness he had run ravening from the north, and passing at length over Taur nu Fuin upon its eastern side, he came down from the sources of Iscalduin like a destroying fire. Nothing hindered him, and the might of Melian upon the borders of the land stayed him not, for fate drove him, and the power of the Silmaril that he bore to his torment. Thus he burst into the inviolate woods of Doriath, and all fled away in fear. Alone of the messengers, Mablung, chief captain of the king, escaped, and he brought the dread tidings to Thingol. Even in that dark hour, Beren and Lúthien returned, hastening from the west, and the news of their coming went before them like a sound of music borne by the wind into dark houses where men sit sorrowful. They came at last to the gates of Menegroth, and a great host followed them. Then Beren led Lúthien before the throne of Thingol, her father, and he looked in wonder upon Beren, whom he had thought dead, but he loved him not, because of the woes that he had brought upon Doriath. But Beren knelt before him and said, I return according to my word. I am come now to claim my own. And Thingol answered, What of your quest and of your vow? But Beren said, It is fulfilled. Even now a Silmaril is in my hand. Then Thingol said, Show it to me. And Beren put forth his left hand, slowly opening his fingers, but it was empty. Then he held up his right arm, and from that hour he named himself Camlost, the empty-handed. Then Thingol's mood was softened, and Beren sat before his throne upon the left, and Lúthien upon the right, and they told all the tale of the quest, while all there listened and were filled with amazement. And it seemed to Thingol that this man was unlike all other mortal men, and among the great in Arda, and the love of Lúthien a thing new and strange, and he perceived that their doom might not be withstood by any power of the world. Therefore at the last he yielded his will, and Beren took the hand of Lúthien before the throne of her father. But now a shadow fell upon the joy of Doriath at the return of Lúthien the fair, for learning of the cause of the madness of Carcharoth, the people grew the more afraid, perceiving that this danger was fraught with dreadful power because of the holy jewel, and hardly might be overthrown. And Beren, hearing of the onslaught of the wolf, understood that the quest was not yet fulfilled. Therefore, since daily Carcharoth drew nearer to Menegroth, they prepared the hunting of the wolf, of all pursuits of beasts whereof tales tell, the most perilous. To that chase went Huan, the hound of Valinor, and Mablung of the heavy hand, and Belek strongbow, and Beren Erchamion, and Thingol, king of Doriath. They rode forth in the morning, and passed over the river Escalduin, but Lúthien remained behind at the gates of Menegroth. A dark shadow fell upon her, and it seemed to her that the sun had sickened and turned black. The hunters turned east and north, and following the course of the river, they came at last upon Carcharoth, the wolf, in a dark valley, down the northern side, whereof Escalduin fell in a torrent over steep falls. At the foot of the falls, Carcharoth drank to ease his consuming thirst, and he howled, and thus they were aware of him. But he, espying their approach, rushed not suddenly to attack them. It may be that the devil's cunning of his heart awoke, being for a moment eased of his pain by the sweet waters of Yscaldwyn, and even as they rowed towards him, he slunk aside into a deep brake, and there lay hid. But they set a guard about all the place, and waited, and the shadows grew long in the forest. Beren stood beside Thingol, and suddenly they were aware that Huan had left their side. Then a great baying awoke in the thicket, for Huan, becoming impatient and desiring to look upon this wolf, had gone in alone to dislodge him. But Carcharoth avoided him, and bursting from the thorns, leaped suddenly upon Thingol. Swiftly Beren strode before him with a spear, but Carcharoth swept it aside and felled him, biting at his breast. In that moment, Huan leaped from the thicket upon the back of the wolf, and they fell together, fighting bitterly. And no battle of wolf and hound has been like to it, for in the baying of Huan was heard the voice of the horns of Orome and the wrath of the Vala. But in the howls of Carcharoth was the hate of Morgoth and malice crueler than teeth of steel, and the rocks were rent by their clamour, and fell from on high, and choked the falls of Yscaldwyn. There they fought to the death. But Thingol gave no heed, for he knelt by Beren, seeing that he was sorely hurt. Huan in that hour slew Carcharoth, but there, in the woven woods of Doriath, his own doom, long spoken, was fulfilled, and he was wounded mortally, and the venom of Morgoth entered into him. Then he came, and falling beside Beren, spoke for the third time with words, and he bade Beren farewell before he died. Beren spoke not, but laid his hand upon the head of the hound, and so they parted. Mablung and Beleg came hastening to the king's aid, but when they looked upon what was done, they cast aside their spears and wept. Then Mablung took a knife and ripped up the belly of the wolf, and within he was well nigh all consumed as with a fire, but the hand of Beren that held the jewel was yet incorrupt. But when Mablung reached forth to touch it, the hand was no more, and the Silmaril lay there unveiled, and the light of it filled the shadows of the forest all about them. Then quickly and in fear, Mablung took it and set it in Beren's living hand. And Beren was aroused by the touch of the Silmaril, and held it aloft, and bade Thingol receive it. "A small prize," he said. "Now is the quest achieved, and my doom full wrought." and he spoke no more. They bore back Beren Camlost, son of Barahir, upon a bier of branches, with Huan the wolf-hound at his side. And night fell ere they returned to Menegroth. At the feet of Hirilorn, the great beach, Lúthien met them walking slow, and some bore torches beside the bier. There she set her arms about Beren and kissed him, bidding him await her beyond the western sea, and he looked upon her eyes ere the spirit left him. But the starlight was quenched, and darkness had fallen even upon Lúthien Tinuvial. Thus ended the quest of the Silmaril, but the lay of Lúthien, release from bondage, does not end. For the spirit of Beren at her bidding tarried in the halls of Mandos, unwilling to leave the world, until Lúthien came to say her last farewell upon the dim shores of the outer sea, whence men that die set out never to return. But the spirit of Lúthien fell down into darkness, and at the last it fled, and her body lay like a flower that is suddenly cut off and lies for a while unwithered on the grass. Then a winter, as it were the hoar age of mortal men, fell upon Thingol. But Lúthien came to the halls of Mandos, where are the appointed places of the Eldalie, beyond the mansions of the west, upon the confines of the world. There those that wait sit in the shadow of their thought. But her beauty was more than their beauty, and her sorrow deeper than their sorrows, and she knelt before Mandos and sang to him. The song of Lúthien before Mandos was the song most fair that ever in words was woven, and the song most sorrowful that ever the world shall hear. Unchanged, imperishable, it is sung still in Valinor, beyond the hearing of the world, and listening the Vala are grieved. For Lúthien wove two themes of words, of the sorrow of the Eldar and the grief of men, of the two kindreds that were made by Ilúvatar to dwell in Arda, the kingdom of earth amid the innumerable stars. And as she knelt before him, her tears fell upon his feet like rain upon the stones, and Mandos was moved to pity, who never before was so moved, nor has been since. Therefore he summoned Beren, and even as Lúthien had spoken in the hour of his death, they met again beyond the western sea. But Mandos had no power to withhold the spirits of men that were dead within the confines of the world after their time of waiting, nor could he change the fates of the children of Ilúvatar. He went therefore to Manwë, lord of the Vala, who governed the world under the hand of Ilúvatar, and Manwë sought counsel in his inmost thought, where the will of Ilúvatar was revealed. These were the choices that he gave to Lúthien. Because of her labors and her sorrow, she should be released from Mandos and go to Valimar, there to dwell until the world's end among the Vala, forgetting all griefs that her life had known. Thither Beren could not come, for it was not permitted to the Vala to withhold death from him, which is the gift of Ilúvatar to men. But the other choice was this, that she might return to Middle-earth and take with her Beren, there to dwell again, but without certitude of life or joy. Then she would become mortal and subject to a second death, even as he, and ere long she would leave the world forever, and her beauty become only a memory in song. This doom she chose, forsaking the blessed realm and putting aside all claim to kinship with those that dwell there, that thus whatever grief might lie in wait, the fates of Beren and Lúthien might be joined, and their paths lead together beyond the confines of the world. So it was that alone of the Eldalir she has died indeed, and left the world long ago. Yet in her choice the two kindreds have been joined, and she is the forerunner of many in whom the elder see yet, though all the world is changed, the likeness of Lúthien the beloved, whom they have lost.